Sam Farrands, thank you so much for joining us on Connections for Change. Sam is the head of the projects group at King, Wood and Mallesons in Hong Kong. And we're really grateful to have you here answering some of our alumni questions. So, Sam, how has the leisure industry been impacted in both Hong Kong and Australia? And what do you think the future could hold for that sector?
The leisure industry has been devastated by the coronavirus, whether it's a hotel, airlines, entertainment venues, sporting events, hubs. They're all decimated because we just can't get together. But funnily enough, the view is that in 2 years' time, things will be fine and back on track. And 2 years sounds a long time, but what we are seeing is a lot of people now investing into those industries, mainly because the cost of capital is so low that people take the view it's costing me next to nothing to build these new hotels and new sports grounds, etc. I'll do it, and in 2 years' time they should be full. But there is a lot of redundancies in the sector at the moment. The hotels we work for, there's 40% pay cut for most executives, 30% for mid-tier management, and 20% for rank and file. So they're doing it very hard. Occupancy rates are in single digits. But I think you've seen it already in Australia, where people are talking about bringing football back and getting around the issue of the virus and working out ways for sports to come back, because Australia is a sport-mad country and we've not been able to watch anything apart from a replay, which is so boring. Now, I think people will get very good at creating events by having no people watching them in the stadiums itself, but it's still being something that people want to watch. I saw something on Offsiders on Sunday where they're talking about having at least 7 AFL games a week coming quite soon. And I think people will start working out how to get people into stadiums with social distancing being worked, and we'll all be watching football again, and stadiums will be getting fuller and fuller because we crave it so much. I think for Australia, in the hotel industry, it will recover a little bit better than most countries because we have domestic travel, which isn't the case in places like Hong Kong, where Hong Kong hotels rely on business and tourism. And I just can't see people being able to fly from one country to another unless they come from that country without a vaccine, because otherwise I think most countries are just not going to be interested in taking people from another, even if they quarantine from now on until the vaccine's found. So I think Australia will get back, maybe not to what it could be if it could allow tourism, and forgetting that bubble that people are talking about with New Zealand, which is fantastic. But it'll get back to something like 50 to 60%, which hotels will still lose money, but not as much. The hotel managers won't, because they generally get paid a percentage of revenue, so they're okay. Hong Kong, I think it's going to take a while. We're not a domestic-led economy. We very much rely on the mainland. Having said that, there's talk already about opening up the border to the mainland, at least to Guangdong province, allowing people that have not been outside Guangdong or quarantined for 14 days to be able to come into Hong Kong without quarantine, and vice versa. And that will really help the hotel industry and the associated industries in Hong Kong on getting back to their feet, but they're very much on their knees at the moment.
Thanks, Sam. So major government infrastructure projects are often a feature of economic recovery packages. How do public-private partnerships, of which you've worked on a number of significant ones, how do they fit into the mix, and how does that differ in different countries and different economies?
Stimulus packages and PPPs normally don't match each other, because with a stimulus package, you want to get the money out the door as quickly as possible. You want your contractor employing people and projects starting to be built. Where PPPs take a while to be developed in terms of not only the documents, but the idea and market sounding, etc. So in a normal situation, if you didn't have a pandemic, design and build will be seen as a preferable option. Having said that, countries around the world, including Australia, have spent so much money in trying to keep the economy afloat and people employed that when it comes to development of infrastructure as part of a stimulus package, they are going to have to rely on the private sector much more and private capital, and that's where PPPs come in. So I've seen already in Australia them announcing that they would expect to have an infrastructure-led recovery, and that will involve PPPs almost for sure. And in Australia, the process of PPPs is very well trodden, it's well accepted. People understand what government wants and what it doesn't. So I would expect there'd be a lot of PPPs and it'd be a very important part of the process. Another form of PPP is asset recycling. And I think all the states in Australia and the federal government will look to sell as much as their infrastructure as they can to the private sector so that they can recoup money as a consequence of spending so much through the coronavirus period. Interestingly, I had a call with a pension fund today out of Canada that is looking at the asset recycling process that will happen in Australia and seeing it as very much an opportunity for them to enter the infrastructure market in Australia. In Hong Kong, it's a bit different. The government here is awash with cash. I think we're the wealthiest nation per capita in the world. And what that means is that they will probably do more design and build here and less PPPs because it takes too long. And the government here is very much focused on the need for speed, getting people employed, and that's just not PPPs. Looking around Asia, that's not the case. I mean, with the exception of Singapore, most Asian countries have really drained their coffers and are continuing to do so to support their people and to avoid the consequences of the pandemic. So, but the infrastructure needs in Asia have been pretty much are worse now than they were before because of population growth and a lack of investment. So I would expect PPPs to be a fundamental part of further infrastructure development in Asia. And I see institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank playing a key role in investing in that infrastructure where countries can't. And we're already seeing indications of that. So despite not liking PPPs, because they do give away control to an extent, governments are just going to have to suck it up and accept that that is the new norm because of the effects of the coronavirus.
Fantastic. Sam Farrands, thank you so much for joining us to answer these alumni questions as part of Connections for Change. We really appreciate hearing from you, and yeah, thanks for coming to us all the way from Hong Kong to answer some of these questions.
Thank you, Joe. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.